The Philadelphia 76ers' disappointing and disgusting season continued on Monday night with a rout from the Chicago Bulls. And while it's easy to continue to dump on this team and the disarray that this franchise is currently in, there has been a bright spot in the past few weeks since the trade deadline. One of the trades that the Philadelphia 76ers made, shipping out Caleb Martin and bringing back in Quentin Grimes, has been a positive, has been something that if you want to look at this from any positive type of direction, any positive type of angle for going forward for this Sixers franchise, this is the video for you with Quentin Grimes being acquired and being on a restricted free agent deal going into this summer. The Sixers will be able to match any offer that he is given, any offer that he signs, any offer sheet. And he has been a plus addition to this team. And while it hasn't reflected in the record for a 24-year-old kind of 3-and-D wing shooter from that you acquired for basically a swap of Caleb Martin, there was a few draft picks thrown in there as well, but the main deal was Caleb Martin for Quentin Grimes. I think if you're a Sixers fan and you're the Sixers front office, and if you want to look at something in a positive light instead of just being super negative all the time and just continuing to bash on everything that we know and disappointing with this Sixers team, Quentin Grimes is surely looking like a bright spot. While he did leave last night's game with some right knee soreness, it sounds like he will be available for the Sixers' next game as he's listed for probable for Wednesday night. He's had a good start to his Sixers run. In the 6 games here, this is going into before last night's game against the Chicago Bulls, averaging 15.8 points per game, shooting about 34% from 3, 47% from the field, 6.5 rebounds per game, 3.8 assists per game. He's shown a pretty well-rounded game. I think kind of the impression of him coming into his stint with the Sixers after acquiring from the Dallas Mavericks was basically just a 3-and-D. Pretty much it. Stand in the stand in the corner, shoot threes, and then go play some defense on the other end. And for him to kind of show a pretty well-rounded game, 6.5 rebounds per game, also dishing the ball for about 4 assists per game, he's been a positive addition. And for a guy that's only 24 years old, and as we said, you have the ability to match any possible contract that he signs, any offer sheet that he signs, I think you have to look at this as a win so far for the Sixers. And while, there's a lot more bigger issues at hand, Paul George even kind of came out and said it last night, like, just the habits of this team, habits of this organization aren't what they need to be right now to be championship caliber, championship contenders. And while I do think that's kind of funny, kind of ironic, because Paul George has never been a piece on a championship team, for him to come out and be the guy to say that it is an interesting way to go about it, but that's a story for another day. This team has much bigger long-term issues at hand, at fold, with Joel Embiid's health, obviously, the main one, with Paul George and what you're going to do with his contract and his current state of play. And just seems like the injury luck continues for this team. But when you look at a season that's probably been 90 to 95% negative, you can look at Tyrese Maxey's play since January as a positive, Jared McCain and his kind of leap at the beginning of the year to being a much better player than anyone expected, as the two kind of positives, and everything else necessarily in the negative direction for this Sixers franchise so far this season. Quentin Grimes, I think, is another person that you can add to the kind of list of positives, as we just showed that graphic with his play thus far. 15.8 points per game, shooting nearly a little over 47%. And as I said, being a well-rounded player, 6.5 rebounds and 3.8 assists per game. He's been a positive addition thus far. And when you look at his time in the NBA so far, obviously it's a short sample size, only being 6 games going into last night. You see he got some minutes last night. You make it 7 games, but he leaves after a pretty decent start as well, but he leaves with some right knee soreness. This is the best kind of stretch of basketball that he's had. He's had some nice moments with the Knicks. He had some nice moments with Dallas as well. But it seems like he's found a fit here, and I think when you look at the Sixers team, there is a good chance, and while Joel Embiid is locked up to this contract extension, there is a good chance that this team does look to get into a rebuild. You're going to have to eventually probably move off that Paul George deal if anyone's able to take it. Joel Embiid situation is a whole other can of worms in itself, but you're going to have to turn to some young guys. This is no longer a team, I believe, that is in kind of a championship type of window. You're going to have to turn to some young guys, and while Tyrese Maxey and Jared McCain appear to be the two players that going forward, at least as of right now, we'll see what happens in the draft, see what happens in the lottery, if the Sixers are able to get that pick. But those kind of look like your two main pieces. You're going to need some defense and shooting around those guys on the wings, and Quentin Grimes is looking like a potential long-term piece for this team. As I said a couple episodes ago, over the next 20, 25 games, whatever you want to call it. It's basically tryout season for these other guys. Will we bring you back for next year? Will you be a part of this team going forward? Kelly Oubre, Gerson Yabusele, two of the veteran type of guys that are in limbo right now. Do they get brought back or not? Yabusele hasn't been playing as well as he was just a few weeks ago. Kelly Oubre's play has taken a dip a little bit, but then you got guys like Jared Butler, you got guys like Justin Edwards as well in the fold. A bunch of young players like that are going to have opportunities coming up. Quentin Grimes is another guy that kind of fits that mold as well. He's a chance to really make himself some money over these next few weeks, whether it's from the Sixers or whether it's from someone else. But if you're the Sixers, I think acquiring him was to help make the playoff push for this year, but also see if he can be a long-term kind of building piece going forward, be a key rotation type of player. When you look at Quentin Grimes and a potential contract that he could get, talking with some people, it sounds like he's going to most likely be between the $8 and $12 million range. And you can kind of look at, this is who he actually got traded for in Caleb Martin. This is a deal the Sixers signed him to. I think this would be, the ideal type of signing, like a $9 to $10 million deal per year. And for a guy that's producing the way that he's produced thus far, obviously not expecting him to be a 15-point per game scorer, but if he can be what he was with the Mavericks, 10, 11, 12 points per game, shoot 35, 36% from three, played good defense. And then, as I said at the beginning, have that well-rounded kind of game that he's shown these past few weeks, whether it's been rebounding, whether it's been passing the ball as well. Quentin Grimes is looking like a guy that I'll be very comfortable giving this contract to. If someone gets him up into that $14 to $15 million range and he signs that offer sheet, then the Sixers probably won't be able to afford to match that. Obviously, there's a lot more hoops to jump through, a lot more questions that are out there with who's going to be on the roster next year. But I do think you could look at the Quentin Grimes trade at the trade deadline as kind of one of the positives of this season thus far. Caleb Martin, we'll see what the roster looks like going into next year, but who knows if there would have been a spot for him. He's a win-now type of player. Quentin Grimes, I think, can help you win now, but also at only 24 years of age, you're able to lock him up. Just say he gets 4 years, $44 million. I think that's a very fair contract for Quentin Grimes, and it would be a team-friendly deal for your sixth or seventh best player going forward. If you're the Sixers, if you're Nick Nurse, if you're Daryl Morey, we'll see if everyone continues to stay in place. But I think that's kind of if you want to be positive about something, it's really hard to with the Sixers team at the state of the organization right now. But I do think that is something that you could turn to and be like, okay, that is a piece we can have going forward. And with two smaller guards in the backcourt and Jared McCain and Tyrese Maxey most likely going forward, you're going to need some help on the wings with defense as well. And then two guys that are able to play, make, and create in those guards. You're going to need guys to hit threes. You're always going to need shooters in the NBA. So Quentin Grimes has been a bright spot over these past few weeks for sure, and something that I think going forward he has a chance to make himself a lot of money over these next few weeks. So kind of hoping he doesn't play necessarily over his head, that the Sixers aren't able to match that deal, but he's been a plus over this 8-game losing streak now that the Sixers are on it. If you want to kind of try and find some positives, try to find a positive spin on something like that, Quentin Grimes has been that guy, and I've really liked what I've seen out of his game. But let me know what your thoughts are in the comments below. What do you think Quentin Grimes will get? Do you believe that the Sixers should match this deal, or do you think this team should just go total rebuild, really blow it up? Tyrese Maxey out the window. I wouldn't want to do that. But there are some people out there on Twitter, out there in the streets, that are calling for a complete and total rebuild. Basically, just kind of start over with Jared McCain. Free up all this cap space and look to kind of tanking and get back to the process ways and start over again. But let me know your guys' thoughts in the comments below. Quentin Grimes, your thoughts on him, what you want the Sixers to do with him going forward. And as always, we'll be keeping it locked here on Sixers Digest through the ups, through the downs. We'll give you all the scenarios. I'm sure we're going to be continuing to keep a close eye on these NBA standings and the potential that the Sixers do get to keep that pick in the top 6 going forward. But as always, drop a like, drop a subscribe, and we'll talk to you next time here on Sixers Digest.